Government Benefits Part 3. In this section, we'll talk about Social Security and Veterans Benefits. Social Security was enacted in the Social Security Act. It's a social insurance program to which people pay during their working lives, and then they receive the benefits from them based on what they've paid in when they retire. If you look at your paycheck, you'll see Federal Insurance Contributions Act withholdings, or FICA, on your paycheck, and that will show a certain amount of money which is taken out at every paycheck that goes toward your Social Security balance. So what does the Social Security program do? It pays benefits to workers and their dependents. The big question is how much. How much is going to depend on the worker's average wage in the jobs that that worker has completed over their working life. Now, the jobs which count are called covered employment. And in order to be covered employment, they must have been jobs, even self-employment jobs, from which Social Security taxes are reported. If Social Security taxes are not reported, then they don't actually count. The employee must have accumulated work credits through paying into the Social Security system. The amount of benefit is going to be determined by the worker's history of all reported earnings in covered employment since the beginning of work in which that particular person paid taxes to Social Security. And Social Security is the program who's going to administer Social Security benefits. There are three categories of Social Security benefits which I want you to be aware of. The first one we've already talked about. That's the federal Social Security disability benefits part. There are also retirement benefits and dependents and survivors benefits. The first are retirement benefits. In order to be eligible for retirement benefits, you must have engaged in some sort of covered employment, and you must be at least 62 years old. So a client who comes in who's 62, who has not engaged in covered employment and has not paid taxes out of their paycheck to Social Security would not be able to recover this benefit. The amount in benefits goes up for each year you wait to retire. And so although clients may be eligible to retire at 62 and receive retirement benefits, if they do not retire at 62 but wait a couple of years, the amount in benefits which they are going to receive is actually going to go up for each year, and this happens until they reach the age of 70. Social Security is what's known as an entitlement program. An entitlement program is a program which guarantees benefits to qualified recipients. In other words, there's no means test. If you remember the eligibility requirements that we just spoke about, really you only have to be 62 and have worked and paid into Social Security. There's nothing which says that you have to be low income. So just as a low income individual can at 62 apply to get the retirement benefits under Social Security, so can Donald Trump. So can Bill Gates when he reaches 62. And anybody else who you might consider not necessarily to need the money can pull their money out of Social Security because it is an entitlement program. The second type is dependents and survivors benefits. You may be eligible for dependents and survivors Social Security benefits if the client has a spouse of 62 years or older if the client is a spouse of 62 years or older of a retired or a disabled worker, or the person is a surviving spouse of 60 years or older of a deceased worker who would have qualified for retirement or disability. So children may be eligible as well under this particular category. The client could also be a divorcee who is 62 years or older, whose marriage lasted at least 10 years and has been divorced over 2 years and has not remarried. A big question people think about with Social Security is the question of whether or not Social Security is going broke. There have been many projections out there which talk about Social Security and whether or not it's going to last us into the retirement of the next generation. In 2017, it is projected that benefits payments will begin to exceed the taxes collected. And in 2041, the Social Security Trust Fund will actually run out of money. How does this happen? Well, it happens when you have more people retiring than you have people who are working. You may have heard of the baby boomer generation or be a part of the baby boomer generation. We had a whole bunch of people who paid into Social Security who are going to be entitled to take that money out. And the way that Social Security works is that you put your money into the account while you are working, but that money doesn't sit in an account and wait for you to retire. That cash is actually paid out to whoever is retiring at the time, and that money is taken out and given to them. And so, while there were a whole lot of baby boomers, for example, who paid into that account, their money was being paid out to the people in front of them who were retiring. And now, when they're looking to retire, it's the generation below them whose payments into Social Security will be taken out to pay for them. But unfortunately, there are fewer folks who have been paying into this. And so you can think of it as an inverse triangle, with the baby boomers being on the top. Those folks are the ones who are the larger number, who are withdrawing money and who are going to be up for their entitled benefits. But the folks underneath them are far fewer, and they're paying in far less money. And so there won't be enough money in the trust fund in 2041 in order to accommodate everybody who is seeking to take their money out and is entitled to under Social Security. Social Security has not been on the chopping block, as we've seen with Medicare and other programs that the government issues, mostly because it's popular. It's popular because everybody gets old. Not only poor people, not only disabled people, but it really applies to everybody. And this is important because when you look at the demographics of people who actually vote, they're included in those people who are going to get Social Security. And that's why it's a very touchy topic politically. The next program I want to talk about is called SSI. It's Supplemental Security Income. And I want to group this in with the Social Security part of the lecture because it's actually administered at a local Social Security office. The program is intended to guarantee a minimum income to the elderly, blind, or disabled folks. So it is money that's coming in. It's a cash benefit. And it's a joint federal and state program which is applied for at the local Social Security office and administered through the local Social Security office. How much of a monetary benefit you can get depends on each individual. The maximum SSI payment is going to be a monthly income limit, which is going to be calculated for each individual. It depends on the type of disability and their projected ability to return to work. So your client's SSI payment is going to be this maximum monthly maximum social SSI payment minus their income that they take in. It is reduced by $1 for every $2 in wages or self-employment, which is earned over $65 a month. That first $65 is exempt. And the maximum amount is also going to be reduced by $1 for every $1 of unearned income over $20 a month. So this is if they receive other types of benefits, for example, or they receive a pension or annuity or interest on their savings. Some folks actually have dividends or money from investment or property. All of that can be deducted as well. Additionally, your client's SSI payment may be reduced by up to a third for credits for living with a friend or a relative or for not paying for food or shelter. So in other words, not having to pay rent or not having to pay for your grocery bills is going to be taken into consideration when SSI is calculating the maximum SSI payment which is going to be applied for that particular client. There are 4 requirements for SSI, so let's go through them one at a time. The first requirement is that the client must be 65 years or older, or blind or disabled. Let's look at the definitions for blind and disabled as they relate to SSI. Blind in this instance means that you have a vision that is no better than 20/200, or your field of vision is limited to 20 degrees or less. So the person does not have to be completely blind, as in non-seeing in any way, but they must at least be legally blind according to this definition. The definition of disabled for SSI is that the client has a physical or a mental impairment This physical or mental impairment must prevent them from doing any substantial work and must last at least 12 months or result in death. The second requirement for SSI is that the applicant must be income eligible. So SSI is going to look at the different types of money which come into the household to determine whether or not the client should receive SSI. They will count things like gifts, rent which is subsidized or given to you if you live with a friend or family member, food which may be given to you or you don't have to pay for, and housing received from others. Things that do not count, on the other hand, would be the first $20 that you get from unearned income. So that's, for example, those ones we spoke about in the previous slide, except from public assistance. The first $65 of earned income plus 1/2 of all earned income over $65. Any irregular earned income up to $10, so a gift coming in, for example, or something that is not normally expected as part of the monthly income. And irregular unearned up to $20, and food and shelter from nonprofit agencies. Additionally, students who are under 22 who get income under $6,600 do not have to count that, as long as that amount is $6,600 per year. Food stamps also do not count, energy assistance, and housing assistance from the federal government. So there's a lot that could actually be taken out when we're looking at things that won't count towards income to determine whether or not that particular client is income eligible. The third requirement is a $2,000 limit on assets. If the client applying for SSI is married, the limit goes up to $3,000. Assets which do not count include your home. So if the person owns a home and is living in it, then they don't have to count that asset. If that home is a rental property and someone else is staying in it and they are receiving income for that, then that would count to the $3,000 or $2,000 limit on assets. One car also does not count, as well as personal property up to $2,000. Wedding rings also don't count, or property essential to self-support or used in a job or a trade which you use up to $6,000. Life insurance policies with a face value of $1,500 or less do not count, as well as funds for burial, which have been set aside for burial or in specific counts burial, up to $1,500. The fourth requirement is legal status. This eligibility requirement can be looked at in two ways. First, the applicant can be a citizen or legal resident of the United States who has paid Social Security taxes for at least 40 work quarters. So that's about 10 years. Remember, we're thinking about work credits and how much is accumulated. Or the applicant can be either a legal resident veteran or a legal resident veteran's spouse, or a person guaranteed political asylum or refugee status, or they could be lawfully residing in the United States since August 22, 1996 and be disabled, or be receiving SSI since August 22, 1996. These four categories are known as immigration status for requirement for SSI eligibility, and so you don't necessarily have to be a citizen or a legal resident, but you can also be eligible under the immigrant status if you fall into one of these four categories. Now, the sections in black I'd like you to pay particular attention to because they're stated a little bit differently in your book, and so these are just things that I want you to understand, that lawfully residing in the United States is also a category which through immigration status folks can be eligible under as long as they've been lawfully residing since August 22nd, 1996, or if they were able to receive SSI through another program, some other way they were actually receiving it, they can be grandfathered in, and so they wouldn't have to fulfill these requirements again. Oh, whoops. A little message popped up here. That was to remind me of something else which is not in your book, which is that the person who is granted political asylum or refugee status must be applying within the first 7 years of their status. And so they can't have sat on their right and waited and then later on decided to apply for SSI. It must happen within these first 7 years. Now we'll talk a little bit about veterans benefits. And again, we have a situation where we have benefits coming from both the federal government and the state government, so we'll talk about both programs. Federal veterans benefits provide several different types of benefits to veterans. So those are folks who have served in the armed forces in this country, and it's administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs, if you've ever heard of the VA. In order to apply for these programs, clients should be directed to the VA regional office that's nearest to them, and you are eligible to receive these benefits if you have some sort of service history. You have to be either an honorable or dishonorable discharge or be currently in active service. State benefits pile on top of the federal benefits, and so under the VA you can receive federal benefits, and then you can also receive additional benefits from the California Department of Veterans Affairs, so that's the CDVA. This program provides additional benefits to veterans, which include home loan benefits like the CalVet program, which allows veterans to apply for low cost and low interest financing if they're buying the home which they're going to live in. It also gives education and training benefits for children and dependents of veterans, and so this can help with college application fees, this can help with other college fees as well, and service-related and disabled or deceased benefits come in as well for veterans who fall into that category, who their children may be able to receive and their dependents may be able to receive further benefits for their education and training. And then there also are elderly and homeless housing benefits. There is long-term residential care, there's assisted living and skilled nursing. There are also other benefits which allow veterans to rent and to be assisted with rental property and to get into rental properties. In order to qualify for these, veterans must be 62 years old or disabled and be California residents who had served honorably. Remember, with these state benefits that we're talking about here, these apply to California. So if you're in a different state, you definitely have those federal VA benefits, and you want to check with the local state Department of Veteran Affairs to see what state benefits can be applied on top of that. In California, you want to send the client to visit their county Veterans Service Office. This will allow them to apply for any benefits that the CDVA has. Also, if they go to their federal VA, they'll be able to direct them to any resources that the state is going to offer for them as well.